Welcome to Fungos and Footnotes, the podcast where baseball meets the deeper side of the game. This show is for players, parents, and coaches who care about more than just box scores. We talk development, recruiting, mindset, leadership, and the lessons baseball teaches us that last long after the final out. Because the game shapes you and the footnotes matter. Let's get into it. Your 11-year-old's team just won a tournament. Everyone's celebrating, posting pictures, rings are being handed out. But here's the real question. Did the players actually get better? Today, we're talking to the parents about something that honestly gets lost in select baseball, and that's this concept of development versus winning. Welcome back to this episode of Fungos and Footnotes. I'm your host, Addison Williams, alongside co-host Coach T, Corey Thornton. Coach T, let's jump into it this afternoon. Are you ready?
I'm 100% ready.
Awesome. When it comes to development versus winning, let's talk about the reality of youth baseball for a moment and what the trap of youth baseball actually is. Coach T, you've had a lot of experience from high school to college ball to select ball. Let's hone in from the parents' perspective today. Let's hone in on the aspect of youth baseball for a moment. Quite frankly, it's turned into a trophy race. And we've talked about this a little bit on previous podcast episodes, getting rings and all of that. But Coach T, let's add some color.
No doubt. Now let's first define youth, right? So let's say that's 14 and under. First thing we need to do as parents, we have to determine, and with really young kids, it's hard, but we have to determine, does our player like the idea of being a baseball or softball player, or do they want to be a baseball or softball player? So if they only like the idea, we don't want to push them because they're having fun, they're hanging out with their friends, all of the things that go along with the idea of playing the game. But if they really have a desire to be a good baseball, softball player and have some longevity in the game, then we have to find teams and coaches that will focus on development.
Absolutely. And the system, quite frankly, it rewards winning. And so with that, what we see is, and not that it's a bad thing, but we see tournament rings at 8 to 12 years old. We see playing 5 to 6 games in a weekend, pitchers throwing way too much. And then one of the kickers, and I love to talk about this whenever we talk about development, is kids are locked into positions too early. And so we can paint a picture, but let's talk about why kids, to your point, Coach T, why they need to really want to develop. Not that they like the idea of playing sports, but whenever you step into competitive baseball, it tends to get a little bit gross, if you will, because then it's the logo chase, it's thousands of dollars per year. But the detriment to the kid, why is it important to keep your options open and not lock into a position too early in the development stages?
Okay. Well, we'll hit the position thing in just a second. I'll say one thing that's very important from the family standpoint. Kids have an innate desire to please their parents and have parental approval. And when we push our kids really hard and we verbalize a lot of that, or we show our frustration, or we verbalize our frustration because our kid is not having the level of success that, we want them to have, our kid starts to associate that disapproval with the game. And that burns kids out because their easiest way to get away from that disapproval is to quit the game. And some people call it burnout, some people call it whatever. It can really drive a wedge between the parents and the player. So we need to encourage, but not push. So if our player has expressed the desire to be a baseball or softball player and not just the idea of liking the game and having fun, then again, we encourage them. If we chase winning and we get locked into a position, every kid goes through puberty at different times. We have no idea where they're going to be. We have no idea what their fit's going to be on the high school team. So we want to try to get a well-rounded baseball education on our way up to the high school levels. And the only way to do that is we have to play for teams and coaches that are willing to move guys around and give them a variety of experience. rather than, hey, we have to win, big organization, big name on our chest, whatever it may be. I need to win so I can attract more good players and keep that gravy train rolling. And the problem with that is we're looking at 9 guys in the lineup, minimal rotation, and some kids are on the outside looking in, and the other kids maybe they become really good players because they're playing good competition, but they're limited in their scope. And then so when they move up to the high school level, maybe there's not a spot there where that kid plays at, where that kid's adept at. So we have to be able to keep our options open and focus on the development.
Absolutely. And whenever you focus on development, even from a child's perspective, sports aside, they are still a sponge when it comes to learning. Whenever you start talking about ages 9 through 14, specifically when people start to have the exposure to, I don't want to play rec ball anymore. I want to get into more competitive environments, which is great and it's healthy. But we have to remember at the baseline of child development, they should still be learning throwing mechanics and fundamentals of the game. And Coach T, I love what you were talking about, not only on this episode, but one of the key things that you love to hone in on is baseball IQ and confidence and the love of the game. Whenever you can develop, you're going to naturally be better at the game because you're developing those fundamentals and those key things in situations as you get older from 8 to 14. That's going to put you in a very strong caliber at the high school age moving forward.
Absolutely. And so baseball IQ is ultimately if you have some familiarity with every single position, even though you may not play those positions as a primary or secondary position, that long term leads to having good IQ. Great example: man on second, line drive shortstop, second baseman's late getting to the bag. Well, if that guy's played there a lot, he's going to break on that ball off the bat. He's going to realize, hey, we might have a chance to double that guy off if I can get there. And so, but it's not just that. The right fielder, when the shortstop makes a bad throw, the right fielder, he realizes, hey man, I got to be on the move to back that up in case. And so all of those things play in. So when you expose those players to a variety of different situations, they learn the game, they increase their overall baseball IQ. And so they become better players all around. And when they move on and they have to make a position change, possibly, we're not asking those guys to do something that they have no real familiarity with. The other part, too, when it comes to overall locking in on the winning and that kind of a thing, when we're in that team environment, the coach has a limited amount of time to devote to each individual player. If we're pitching and we don't do well, well, the coach is going to go get us. So the next week at practice, when we're practicing and it's time to throw bullpens, I might need 40 minutes to work with a guy in the pen because we need to go through some throwing progressions and totally change some mechanical actions or work on his arm or all of those things. But I don't have 40 minutes to devote to one player when I have 13 players on the team and an hour and a half to practice. So it's very important that we find a team where we can get a variety of different positions and a team that is financially feasible that allows us as a family to supplement the team-oriented practice and season with some individual skill work. Maybe that's with the coach, maybe it's with someone else in a private lesson setting. It could be anything, but if our player wants to be a good baseball player, we're going to have to supplement some of the individual skill stuff, pitching, fielding, hitting, catching, with on the side because we don't have enough time in the team environment, especially when winning is the main goal. We don't have enough time in the team environment to dedicate because we're focusing on team play and probably the top 9 guys. And so it's really difficult to get those individual skills when you're guided only by winning.
Yeah, hands down. I agree. And to clarify, we're not anti-winning
Heck
on
no,
this
I want to win every
podcast.
game I play, buddy.
Yeah, I mean, winning teaches competition, accountability, resilience, but the danger is winning creates an environment where it's a terrible development plan. Because if you
Yes.
chase the rings weekend over weekend, are you really focusing on development? And parents that are listening to this, Coach T, I want to hone in a little bit because we have talked about team shopping before, but what would you say would be a great indicator, some green flags, perhaps some red flags for programs that are focused on development versus programs that are just focused on winning? What would you say to look for in terms of program shopping, if you will, to make sure that you're on the right team?
Well, first thing we got to do as a parent, we need to have our player go to as many tryouts as he can. We need to listen to what the coaches say, listen to their input while the players are going through the tryout, pick up any nuggets that we might for our player, because usually the coaches are going to talk to the kids about, hey, let's do this or do that, and throw some tips that out there. We need to pay attention to that. We can pick up a lot and learn about the staff or the coach from those tryouts. And then we need to ask questions at the end of the tryout. What's the team goal? How many tournaments we're going to play in? Where do you see my player fitting on the team? If you have a position in mind as a primary position, what do you think that position might be? How much are you going to rotate? That kind of a thing. So we have to ask those pointed questions as parents. And I do think we need to do a multitude of tryouts. Number one, the more tryouts our players do, the better they get at it. So they're not quite as nervous. And that'll help when high school comes along because we're going to have to try out for the high school team. So the more teams we try out for, the better. And that gives us an opportunity to talk to more coaches, look coaches in the eye when they're talking to us. We get a better feel for those guys personally. And then I think when we have a team in our area, it's a big name team, super popular team. Everybody knows them. Man, I sure wish we could be on that team because they win everything. That team's usually really good because they have some good coaches, but they get so many people try out for them. They generally have really good, highly skilled players. And if we're still in the development stage as a player, that's probably not going to be a good fit for us. And if we do make that team, we're probably going to be on the second or third team out of that group, which is going to be more revenue oriented versus development oriented. And the problem with that is I'm probably going to have a little lower level coach on that team because the guys that have a lot of experience or have proven to be really good coaches, they're probably coaching the top group. So when we get caught up in being on this team or that team for the name on the jersey, we can get lost in the shuffle pretty easy. And the drawback there is it's expensive. And we've taken a lot of our finances that are available and used them on the team, which ended up not being what we thought it would be because we're not really on the team that gets all the accolades. And we don't have the finances available to work on those individual skills on the side. So when we're out there team hunting, we need to talk to a lot of coaches, ask a lot of questions, and do multiple tryouts. And quite frankly, now with I think you can do a lot of searching. You can search on the coaches, you can search on the teams, and you can learn a lot about the organization that may not necessarily be listed on their website.
Yeah, absolutely. And whenever you think about the development age, that 8-year-old player that's just stepping into select baseball, that's not going to be the same player that's going into high school at 15 or
Right.
dominating the field as a junior and senior at 17, 18. What a lot of people don't realize is development is huge. I mean, I even developed playing college baseball, and even as a coach, the opportunity to instill the positive elements of development for the long game, those are the players and coaches that really bond. And we hear about the Cinderella stories all the time when it comes to high school, college ball, even in the big leagues. There are Cinderella stories, but the most important thing to realize whenever they have those Cinderella stories, they might not be the best athletes. I mean, a lot of the teams that have the Cinderella stories, they're not coming in as number one seed in the tournament. They're coming in at seed 16 or
That's
13.
right. That's right.
And the bond that these guys form starts in the locker room. It starts with development, it starts with culture, and instilling that in a messy world of select baseball right now to the parents. As much as you can take T's advice and focus in on asking the right questions and getting into an organization that does see the long game for baseball, not just an opportunity to fill gaps, that's where you're going to see the really powerful moment of this is the right fit for my kid. And it's also going to take the pressure off of him or her to really contribute to the team environment.
Absolutely. I think if you establish early on what your goals are from the coaching standpoint to the parents, like I said in the last episode, I talked to my families when I had a youth team before the season. Hey, look, if we play 4 games on the weekend, mission accomplished, because I had guys that threw on Saturday and guys that threw on Sunday. I did not like the idea of throwing young players back to back days, even if they didn't throw that many pitches. I just was not that guy. So I had Saturday guys and I had Sunday guys. And if we played more than 5 games total in the tournament, more than 3 games on Sunday, now I'm having to go back and get some of those kids that threw on Saturday and throw. I'm not typically into that. I wouldn't go out there and play a less than stellar lineup. I would certainly, like I said, I'm competitive. I want to win every game, but to me, it's just not worth it. But I did make sure that information was known by my parents ahead of time.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember those first season meetings with the parents, especially when you're paying money for travel ball. You want to make sure that the coach is vested. And I remember having those conversations with the parents by themselves. The kids weren't around, but it's like, parents, you paid money to trust me as your coach. Between the lines, I'm going to do as much as I can to make sure that your sons, have the most positive experience. Yes, we want to win, but the most important thing that we want to do is not only develop the players in between the lines to do what we need to do to be successful as baseball players, but also the lessons learned along the way. Like those are insurmountable because we don't remember who won the 11U tournament, but we do remember how that player plays in high school.
Yeah, absolutely. And the other thing too is if we're not if we're not focusing on development at least to a certain level, the time in the game becomes less fun and it becomes lesser amount because other players are going to pass you up in time. And then your longevity in the sport is going to shrink. So the more development time you get, the more emphasis and energy you can put into development, the more fun the game becomes because the more success the player has as an individual. And then also, right, rising tides raise all ships. So if all of the kids are developing and growing and improving their game, the team is going to improve and get better and they're going to win more. And then they're going to play the game a lot longer. So if the kid really has a goal of being a baseball player and playing high school baseball, then development is super important. I do think winning does become a thing at a certain age. I would say high school varsity, very important. We need to win. 2 reasons we need to win. Teams that win, they get recruited harder. So the kids that are on that team that want to be college baseball players, they're going to get a much better opportunity because those teams that win a lot, those teams that predominantly win and win year after year, the college coaches know, hey, they got good players. I'm going to go over there. I'm not going to waste my time. I'm going to watch them. Same in the summer. The teams that are continually really good and putting out good players, they're going to get scouted harder than the teams that don't win consistently. But our goal in the youth ball, if we want to be a baseball player, needs to be to put ourselves in a position to make the high school team. Now, if we make the high school team and we're on the JV, our goal needs to be to make the varsity. And once we're on the varsity, hey, we got to win. Now, don't get me wrong, junior college coaching, I still got to work on development, and we did have a lot of development. That there were guys that would come in as a freshman, they'd be undersized, or maybe they were a freakish athlete, and their skill wasn't exceptionally high because maybe they came from a small town or whatever that may be. Those guys need to develop higher skill levels, or they may need to develop physically, and so the good news is we have all fall on the junior college side to play games, work out in the weight room, all of those things. And when I was doing it, we weren't constricted by time. So my practices could easily be from 1 till dark in September or till I was done. Kids would ask me all the time, hey, coach, what time's practice Bill? When I feel good that we've accomplished today's goals, that's when practice is over. But yeah, if you don't put that time in on the development side, it's not going to aid your team in improving. Now, if you've got 9 kids at age 12 that are better than every other team out there, their 9 kids, you're going to win a bunch of games just writing names on the lineup and doing the bare minimum at practice. But that does none of those players any good because when all of the kids start to hit puberty, those players that have honed their skills and they get passed up, right? Because they haven't put any emphasis into the development part and they haven't put any, it's not just emphasis, discipline. It takes mental discipline for those guys to go out there in the garage or the backyard or down the street to the local batting cage and put that time in to make themselves a better player. And so those players don't have that discipline. And so they, because they've never had to do it, if they're starting on that when they're 13 or 14 years old, it might be too late.
That is a good point. I remember back to when Tony Dungy wrote his book as he was coaching the Colts. They had just won the Super Bowl, and the day after, Coach Tony got interviewed, and they asked him, "Hey, are you focused on the Super Bowl? Are you ready to go for a repeat?" And he said, "No, I'm focused on practice today. That is what I'm focused on." And this idea of trophies and rings. Yeah, they look cool. The banners are cool. We all want to win. But when winning takes the sacrifice of development, especially in youth baseball, that's whenever we start missing the mark because
Yep.
those guys on the Colts team, they had a job to do and they weren't going to get the hype of obviously, yeah, it's great to win the Super Bowl. And would you love to go for a repeat? And they actually did. They won the Super Bowl twice. But the idea is they were focused on today. They were focused on practice today and putting in work where nobody else saw it. And the idea of development is to not be lazy.
Yeah. I think the coaches that are really good, I think they have pretty clear cut goals for their practice. I always kind of set my youth practices up into 3 parts. One part would be pure rep oriented. Let's get some fungo going. Let's get some field and grounders or some infield drills. Let's get some outfield drills. Let's get that going. That was one part. The second part would be whatever kind of team activity we needed, rundowns, relays, bunt coverage, holding runners, whatever it may, first and third, whatever. That would be a third. And then the last third would be kind of a 2-parter. So maybe 1/6 and 1/6 instinct driven activity. Something because when the ball is live in the game, the player doesn't have time to think. It needs to be instinctive. And so let's put some runners on, let's hit some live balls, let's get some game situation going. And it could be a singular situation. Man on second, base hit to right. Let's get everybody in the right position. Let's work the relay. Let's keep our eye on the the batter runner, don't give him the extra base, that kind of thing. And then 1/6, the last little piece of it, we got to have some kind of competition. It's got to be fun. Tee game, bunt game, something to give our players some. Players are going to be as competitive or more competitive against their teammates than they are against a team you play on a game day, just because bragging rights for those guys is so huge. So we have to have clear, concise goals for our practice every single day. And the good coaches, I think, they take care of that. The kids know it. And when they achieve that goal, they know it, and it builds that confidence. And again, that leads to more team success. Now, those aren't individual skill oriented practices because, again, I don't have time as a coach to work individual skills with 15 players, and neither does a high school coach. So now I was in the training business for a long time too. So I did a lot of individual skill activities with thousands of kids. And so those are vitally important. And I understand that. I would try to do what I could in the time allotted for every kid. I don't think you do any service to your player if you don't. But and I would work extra after with kids too that needed it. But ultimately, we're probably from the parent side, we're going to have to look for those types of things outside of the team setting.
Coach Day, I've been a part of your practice, not from a player perspective, but from an adjacent coach perspective. And one thing that I think that a lot of youth sports miss, that I credit a lot to your practices, is everybody's always moving and doing something. There's no sitting around. Whenever it
Got to
comes
be.
to youth baseball, and even I've been a part of some high school practices where there's a lot of standing around, and that's not doing anybody any favors. So think of creative ways, especially if we're talking recreational ball. Do yourself a
Or
favor,
young
parents.
kids.
Yeah, you got young kids. Do yourself a favor and look up drills online so that we can incorporate this, not so much as it's just fast paced to be fast paced, but baseball inherently is a slower game than football or basketball. And so the more that we can raise the tempo in practices, the better off that team dynamic is going to be, but also how that player development is going to be, because they're not just sitting around on their hands figuring out the next thing to do.
Well, if we have a lot of idle time at practice, our focus wanders and players get bored. And when we're talking about young ages, we're driving kids away from our game because it's boring. Our practices are boring. We can do nothing about the games for the most part at those young ages. Kids struggle. I'm not talking T-ball, 8U, 9U. Kids struggle throwing the ball in T-ball and making defensive plays. In kid pitch, those first couple of years, kid pitch, kids struggle throwing strikes. So there's not a lot of action. If I'm playing right field, I'm bored. So we drive kids away from game and baseball by adding to that boredom with crappy boredom, boring practices. So, and we just don't get the mental engagement either when we allow a lot of time for young minds to drift off and daydream and lose focus.
Absolutely. And one thing that I would like to double down on and take a little bit of a different approach whenever we talk about development and winning. Some select teams play 80 to 100 games per year. They never have an off season. And then you've got colleges that play 56 games a year and they have an off season. They're using the fall to develop with some fall games. But we've got a lot of this interesting thing, parent of a youth baseball and softball player. And at 8U and 6U, we've got 2 practices a week.
So let me ask you this. If you play 5 games on Sunday and it's 105 degrees outside, certainly we had some benefit from some of that game time, some of that activity. After the end of that 5th game, do you think that was productive or counterproductive? I can assure you at some point in time, we move from productive activity into counterproductive, especially on the arms. A lot of throwing, a lot of warm up, cool down, warm up, cool down, a lot of inning changes. We play that much, it can become counterproductive if you're looking at player health. The other part too is just the quality. Guys get tired, they get beat down. Are they getting quality at bats, even though they may be facing a really good pitcher because they've been out there for 4 hours or 5 hours or 6 hours? Are they getting is that 15th at bat of the day? Is that really going to be quality? Maybe, maybe not. I don't know. And then so I just don't think playing 65 games to play 65 games is vitally important. I don't think 2 practices a week are vitally important for young kids. Now, do I think 2 practices a week are okay? I did 2 practices a week. One was hitting in bullpen, one was outside. So one was inside, one was outside. So they were different skills. And when we were outside, I was really, really cognizant of how much arm work are we getting outside, because we just threw bullpens a couple of days ago and we play in a day or two. So I was really careful on my arm stuff outside as much as I could be. Certainly we have to throw some balls across the infield. We got to make a few relay throws. Catchers need to throw, but we don't need to overdo it. So I paid real close attention to that so I could limit that. Now, do I think kids don't throw enough? Just the act of throwing? Yeah, I don't think kids throw enough. Go out and play catch, warm up. Our catch play is vitally important. I don't think coaches stress catch play enough. Feel of the ball coming out of your hand, commanding the ball. When you get a ground ball hit to you and it's in the hole and you fall down to a knee or something and you got to get up and throw the ball harder than you typically throw, you throw it away. Why? We haven't developed that feel because our catch play hasn't challenged us enough. So one of these days we'll do a video on my team handbook because I have a whole section on catch play with basically a whole program on this is how we're going to warm up. And I wasn't a stickler about it. I gave it to the kids. We talked about it. Summer league, didn't make that big a deal about it. College baseball, a little bit different. But I wanted them to have the information because those kids that wanted to learn and wanted to maximize their ability, they took that to heart. The other kids that just like the idea of being a baseball player, maybe not so much.
Yeah. Well, we've talked about Coach BJ and Denny Dixon on a previous podcast episode, but I remember whenever I stepped into select baseball for the first time, we had done independent tournaments as my dad was a coach, but then I started playing for Coach BJ with the Mavericks and talking about catch play, talking about executing every time you got a baseball and a glove in your hand. We'd play catch, we'd come back in, we'd get about 5 yards apart, we'd work on short hops, forehand and backhand every
Yep.
single time. And that is through and through what we're talking about here. It's not that you have to completely overhaul everything that you do. It's just finding intentional ways in the midst of warming up for practice. Those extra reps, those separate the current players now from the college baseball players down the road, or even high school for sure.
Yeah, no doubt. I saw just a couple of days ago on my Twitter timeline, Ron Washington working with big league guy doing short hops. Look, Wash is considered a top infield guy, coach, and he's got big league guys out there doing short hop drills. Now, this wasn't a spring training video. Certainly, they work on that stuff during spring training. No, this was middle of the week at the home stadium, just down the foul line, working short hops with the guy. So we can't we need to find ways to be creative in practice and keep the kids interested, but we also have to make sure the kids understand that the game is repetitive and some of our repetitive practice is going to be just that. It's going to be repetitive. So we need to focus on trying to put our goal in those repetitive activities, perfecting those. The challenge is perfecting those. Let's get 15 in a row. Let's get 18 in a row. That way we kind of have a running challenge and we don't get so beat down with the monotony of the repeated activity. So
Absolutely. And Coach T, you were talking about the longevity and development and a little bit about select baseball. And I'd like to bring two thoughts together as we've been talking about this idea of development and winning. But research across youth sports show that about 70% of kids quit organized sports by the age of 13. And so, one thing to recognize here, parents specifically, is that you're talking or listening to guys that have been in various roles in competitive sports our entire life, ultimately. And we know that select baseball is not going away. In fact, I do believe it's very beneficial for youth sports to have competitive baseball. But the key is whenever you're looking to step into select baseball for the first time, or you might be looking at other teams' opportunities, we've said it and we continue to preach it. Find out from the coach and the organization, what do they stand for? Because we advocate for competitive sports. We love to win. But whenever you can also combine the aspect of winning and development in the same
Yes.
organization to where it's both beneficial for you, the parent, and the player that wants to really experience the love of the game, that's what we're talking about. We want to win. We don't want to lose because we're competitive at heart. But whenever you sacrifice the love of the game, why you even said yes to select baseball in the first place, that's what we're talking about in terms of long-term development. So we do keep kids playing longer. Development does thrive. You do have a thriving high school career and beyond, but it's because you took care of the things at 8, 9, 10, 11 years old, and then that propelled your son, your daughter, whoever forward through this organized aspect of select baseball.
Yeah, I think too, one thing we need to do from the parental aspect, when the season is over, we need to reflect where my player started, where did my player finish. Always goal setting is very important, even from the parent. Look, little Jimmy is here. I'd like for him to be here. Or little Jimmy is throwing 51 miles an hour. At the end of the year, I'd like to see him throw 53, 54 miles an hour. Not because we're doing weighted ball training, just because we're working our arm, we're going through our throwing progressions, whatever it may be. So you can do some goal setting, but you mainly just need to reflect. Was the season in its totality, practice and games, did it make my player better? And if we would have played more, or we would have had more organized practices, or we need to ask ourselves those questions. And if our answer is we're not where we want to be, or we're not where we need to be, then let's go back out, restart our search, investigate new teams. With AI, you can search really quick nowadays and hit a lot of tryouts up and start talking to more people. If you start that process when the kids are 9 or 10, when those kids are in that 12, 13, 14-year-old range and they're really gearing up to make that high school team, you'll be a pro at knocking down those good teams and finding those good coaches, and you're going to have your kid in a good situation.
Hands down. At the end of the day, it's exactly what you said, Coach T. It's helping kids grow into the players who still love the game when it actually does matter, when we're winning. And development today is what gives them a future to even play at those competitive levels. And
Absolutely.
and in true Fungos and Footnotes fashion, I'd love to close out today's talk about development and winning with the box score might tell you who won today, but the footnotes tell you who's actually getting better.
Oh, that's awesome right there. Great stuff.
Coach T, that'll do it for this episode. Parents
Hey,
and families, thank you.
what do we got on tap for next week?
I think that since we're carrying the torch with development and winning, I think it would be very healthy to talk about Matheny's letter to the parents. So that's what's going to be on the docket for next week. So on deck, Matheny's letter to the parents. We will see you next week. For now, this is Addison Williams signing off with Coach T.
See ya.
Thanks for listening to Fungos and Footnotes. This episode helps you see the game or your role in it a little more clearly. Share it with someone who loves baseball too. subscribe, follow along, and stay connected, because the game doesn't just reveal talent, it reveals character, and the footnotes matter.